being completely honest, sometimes I don't really know an interesting way to intro these videos. Do I talk about the episode itself? Do I talk about current events? Do I talk about things that are important for the channel? I really... That'll do. We start the episode with Ash's mum, Misty and Brock leaving Ash behind as they all head to Seafoam Island for a day at the beach. Now Delia going off for a day at the beach is no big deal, but Misty and Brock have been travelling with Ash all this time, and now when it's time for him to finally knuckle down and train and get ready for the Pokemon League, they're just like, screw this guy, let's go to the beach. These two have been there for Ash through so much, but rather than help their friend train using their wealth of experience they have as gym leaders, they're just gonna leave him to train alone? Brock and Misty are terrible friends. Pass it on. Ash walks into Professor Oak's lab and finds Oak sat at the computer, and Oak reacts like he just nutted and realized the porn he was watching wasn't actually that hot after all. Some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Samuel, Oak, there's a time and a place for everything, but not now. Especially when you got the door unlocked, mate. Have some dignity. It turns out what Oak is trying to do is figure out the secret behind Slowpoke and Shellder combining to create Slowbro. He knows how Slowpoke evolves, he just doesn't know why it evolves in that way. Oak, mate, you live in a world where a keyring can be a sentient creature. Does anything really need a reason in this world? Oak says if anyone knows the answer, it'll be Professor Westwood.
It's your boy Westwood back with a brand new series of Pimp My Ride UK.
Oh wait, wrong Westwood. Apparently this Westwood is one of the Pokologists that programmed the Pokedex. Maybe he can explain why Ash's Pokedex has bugger all info on any Pokemon then. Also, what's the difference between a Pokologist and a Pokemon Professor? Answers on a postcard. Professor Westwood apparently lives on Seafoam Island, the exact island that Ash's mum, Misty and Brock have all gone to. How fucking convenient. When Ash meets up with Brock and Misty, Brock explains to Misty that Professor Westwood is the guy who programmed the Pokedex. Ash then says,
"See, I told you I was coming here for training."
But Ash, you're not training to program Pokedexes, you're supposed to be training for Pokemon battles. What good is this little excursion gonna do? Professor Westwood is the fifth in the Westwood line and shows portraits of his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather, and his great-great-grandfather, who all, of course, look identical. See, most people would see this as a whimsical, ahaha, they all look identical, just like all the Officer Jennies and all the Nurse Joys. But to me, it just screams we couldn't be asked to draw different characters. Lazy. The portrait of the current Professor Westwood is strikingly different to the others. So it turns out Westwood didn't just program the Pokedex, he also invented catfishing. And he did it before Facebook and Tinder were ever even a thing. Professor Westwood is interested in Togepi, since he's never seen another Pokemon quite like it. Now I get why, because at this point Pokemon Gold and Silver weren't out yet, and obviously the Johto region therefore wouldn't be known to viewers, blah blah blah, but I feel like this would have been a nice moment to begin introducing it. After all, if this guy is responsible for programming the Pokedex, surely he would know about more Pokemon than literally anybody else. Would it have really been that difficult to have him say something like,
"I see you have a Togepi. I've heard a lot about them from my colleagues in the Johto region."
And Ash could just respond,
"The Johto region?"
And then we could just have Westwood change the subject to start talking about legendary Pokemon like he does in this scene anyway. That way you're giving the viewers a little tease that most people won't take too seriously, but will pique the interest of the more dedicated fans at that time. It's alright Pokemon, I was only 10 years old at the time, so I totally understand why you didn't reach out to hire me. Westwood says the only information he has on legendary Pokemon is what he's created himself because he's not convinced most of them exist. So instead of studying Pokemon that do exist, he writes fanfics about Fakeamon? What kind of Pokologist are you, mate? Westwood sits around fishing for a bit and says it's part of his research into Slowpoke's life cycle, which on the surface makes sense because there is a Slowpoke nearby fishing with its tail, but whilst he's concentrating on his rod, phrasing, Westwood isn't even looking at the nearby Slowpoke, so how is this helping his studies at all? I think he just wanted a break, to be honest. Ash decides to check on what Dexter has to say, and Dexter says that Slowpoke's speciality is fishing. So you mean to tell me that the Pokemon that Westwood just said is one of the few Pokemon that fishes specializes in fishing? Wow, the Pokedex really is an invaluable resource for Pokemon trainers, eh? Something that's invaluable to this channel is likes and comments and shares. Make sure that if you're enjoying this video, you're giving it a like on the good old like button, you're giving it a nice comment, even something simple like, "I enjoyed this video." That really helps us in the algorithm. And of course, sharing this video on Facebook or Twitter. Posting the link, doesn't matter if anyone clicks on it, it's just post the link somewhere, because then YouTube goes, oh cool, someone shared the link, we should recommend this. Really appreciate everybody that does that. And of course, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, because we really want to grow this channel. Turn on all notifications as well, so that you never miss an episode. When discussing Slowpoke's dopey demeanor, Misty says she knows she's seen that expression somewhere before, which prompts Psyduck to spring out of its Pokeball. I'm just saying, Psyduck can't be that dumb if it was able to understand what Misty was hinting at. Psyduck is faking being dumb? Confirmed? Psyduck and Slowpoke proceed to stare at each other in confusion, and whilst I get the idea behind this being to emphasize just how dumb they both are, this scene drags on for way longer than it needs to. Which probably means they needed to pad out the episode a bit, and they realized that this was a perfect filler opportunity. Suddenly a Krabby jumps out of the water and clamps down its claws on both Psyduck and Slowpoke's tails, and then just jumps back into the water. Krabby's a prick. Pass it on. After a few seconds, Psyduck and Slowpoke finally react to the pinches that they both received from Krabby, but this has made me start to wonder how we're actually able to battle using a Slowpoke in the games. Since if it's so dopey to the point it can barely function, why is it that any Slowpoke that we catch in the games will happily use confusion whenever we ask it to, regardless of what level it is?
Well, actually, Liam, just because the anime is based on the games doesn't mean it has to follow them exactly.
Sure, and I can mostly agree with that, but I kind of draw the line at making a genuinely very good Pokemon appear to be completely useless. It's just shit. Slowpoke deserves better. A Magikarp latches itself onto Slowpoke's tail, and Misty says at least Slowpoke's good for something, unlike Psyduck. Brock then leans in and says,
She didn't mean it, Psyduck.
Brock, mate, have you met Misty? She definitely means it. She bloody hates that Psyduck. Meanwhile, Giovanni is relaxing at the beach, because of course that's what you do immediately after your headquarters have been destroyed. But one thing I can't get over at this scene is Persian drinking from a saucer of milk.
Well, actually, Liam, I think you'll find it's very common for people to give their cats a saucer of milk to drink from.
Okay, first of all, you shouldn't be giving cats milk, especially not cow's milk. It's actually not very good for them at all. But that's not my problem here, since of course in the Pokemon world, for all we know, milk could be good for a Persian. Heck, I assume it's Moo Moo milk, so it's probably helping Persian keep its HP full. My problem here is milk on the beach, mate. That's grim, mate. That milk's gonna go rank dead quick. Jesse and James are nearby, and under Giovanni's orders are digging for clams. This is the Pokemon world. What's a clam? James ends up digging up a wild shellder, and as he sends out Weezing to battle it, he does an impression of Ash Ketchum sending out a Pokemon. When Jesse tells him he's acting like that twerp, James says, and I quote, I just wanted to be in his goody two-shoes. Can't quite wrap my head around this. Does James mean he wants to be in Ash's good books? That doesn't really make sense though, because Ash isn't here to witness this. Being in his shoes more likely means that he wants to be like Ash, but at the same time, surely step one of that is leaving your criminal organization. I know I'm reading too much into this, but I'm just confused as to why James is suddenly idolizing Ash Ketchum of all people. Weezing attacks Shellder, but apparently that just hurts Weezing for some reason. And after dodging an ice beam from Shellder, Weezing uses Haze, which is enough to knock out Shellder. Yeah, apparently tackling Shellder did bugger all, but reducing its stat changes that it had none of was enough to take it down. I'm just going to assume that this was meant to be Smog and not Haze, but that is just me desperately trying to make this make sense. Before James can actually capture the Shellder, Jessie pushes him aside and catches it herself. Careful, Jessie. With initiative like that, you might actually become a competent trainer. Giovanni calls Jessie and James over and says he's getting sick and tired of watching them. Well, look away then, mate. Or maybe don't assign them to dig for clams 100 yards away from your spot on the beach. He tells them,
Don't fail me again, or else. Would you like to know what or else means?
Well, based on your track record, Giovanni, or else clearly doesn't mean firing them, so what else is really left for you to threaten them with? Oh, are they going to get another stern talking to like this one? I bet they're quaking in their boots at that. Giovanni wants Jessie, James and Meowth to break into Professor Westwood's lab, but he doesn't say what for. Mate, what could you actually want from Westwood's lab? Apparently all that's in there is a bunch of portraits of identical dead guys and a bunch of made-up Pokedex entries for legendary Fakemon. Waste of time if you ask me. Meanwhile, Professor Westwood explains to Ash and friends that he wants to figure out why Shellder changes from a hinged shell to a spiral shell. He says if he could solve that mystery, he'd become the most renowned Pokemon researcher in the history of the Pokemon Symposium. How are you not already the most renowned Pokemon researcher? You programmed the Pokedex. He says the Symposium would replace his family portrait with a statue of him. Thing is, mate, the Symposium doesn't own the portrait of you. It's in your lab, so why don't you have the statue of you made yourself if it's that important to you? Surely you were given plenty of money when you programmed the Pokedex. Speaking of money, I've got bills to pay, so make sure you use code ACE to save money on G Fuel. That was probably the most blatant segue into the G Fuel spawn I've ever done. That was proper bull in a china shop, wasn't it? But who cares, because I'm drinking guava, and it's lovely and refreshing, perfect for the summer. Use code ACE to get yourself some money off. Oh, that is damn good. Make sure you get guava on your next G Fuel order. Use code ACE for 10% off your entire order, you lovely people. It helps support the channel, so thank you very much. And it helps you because you get money off. How cool is that? Remember, only order G Fuel if you are over the age of 18 because it contains caffeine, and because it contains caffeine, make sure you drink it responsibly. Don't be a dickhead. Team Rocket turned up at the lab via a parasail that they can barely control. This does make me wonder how they expected to break into the lab without being caught using something they don't know how to use. Maybe next time just try a lockpick or something. Keep it simple. Still covered by the parasail, Team Rocket decide it's fine to just start their motto anyway. You'd just take it off, wouldn't you? I know they do remove it in a minute anyway, but you wouldn't start with it still over your head. Surely even Jesse and James don't like to look this much of a twat. They tell Westwood he's going to program the Team Rockadex, which I assume is basically a database of all the Team Rocket employees. What would even be the point of this? Surely Team Rocket's Human Resources Department would already have all the details of all of the grunts so that payroll could pay them, right? Oh wait, Mewtwo killed everyone. Yikes, I guess they're starting from scratch. Carry on. Westwood panics because he thinks Team Rocket are gonna kidnap him and use him as their slave. Dude, like I just pointed out, they just lost their entire headquarters and probably all of their scientists. I doubt they'll enslave you. They probably just want to hire you. Meowth tells Westwood that they're here to steal Pokemon, and Westwood reveals that this one Slowpoke is the only Pokemon he's got in his lab. Whoa. Slow down. You mean to tell me you've been studying Slowpoke's evolution into Slowbro and the changes that Shellder goes through during this process all this time, and you never once thought to go and catch a Shellder? Westwood, mate, you're a numpty. Jessie points out that she now has a Shellder, and Meowth says that when their Shellder clamps down on Slowpoke's tail, they'll have a Slowbro to bring back to the boss. And that's genuinely got me wondering. Say there are two trainers, and Trainer 1 owns a Slowpoke, and Trainer 2 owns a Shellder. If Trainer number 2's Shellder clamps onto Trainer number 1's Slowpoke, and they evolve together into Slowbro, does the Slowbro belong to Trainer 1 or Trainer 2? Because technically you could argue that since Trainer 1's Slowpoke evolved, then it's their Slowbro. But then hold on, because that means that Trainer 2 is suddenly -1 Shellder, which isn't exactly fair. I guess in this instance there needs to be some kind of Slowbro custody battle? I guess that means because Trainer 2 is technically just the Shellder donor, they would only get to see Slowbro on every other weekend, and they'd be paying out the wazoo in Slowbro support checks. That's what you get for letting your Shellder nibble freely. Always use protection. Westwood screams at his Slowpoke to run away, but of course Slowpoke doesn't react, so Westwood just straight up deadlifts Slowpoke and runs away with it. Jesus, mate, that's nearly 80 pounds, or 36 kilograms for those that use kilograms. Who knew Westwood was this hench? Oh no, I'm gonna get loads of dude bros in the comments now, like,
bro, 80 pounds is nothing. I can bench that with my pinky finger. All you gotta do is drink more protein, and then you can get those sick gains nobody mentioned wanting.
Whatever helps us in the algorithm. It's never explained how Slowpoke is suddenly quick enough to react and run away from Shellder in this scene, so I guess we just have to assume it's an instinct thing, like it knowing how to fish. But if that's the case, then its instincts make no sense here, because why wouldn't Slowpoke instinctively want to evolve into Slowbro and become stronger? Ash tells Jessie to leave Slowpoke alone, and Misty interrupts and says they're at the ocean and water Pokemon are her specialty. I mean, here's a crazy idea. Why don't you both send out Pokemon to try and help Slowpoke? Like, even if you're really adamant about sticking to Pokemon battle etiquette and you want to have just a one-on-one battle with Shellder, the other person's Pokemon could be helping Slowpoke get away in the background. Meanwhile, Brock's not even thinking about getting involved, as per usual. Misty goes to send out Staryu, but Psyduck sends itself out instead, blocking the path of Shellder, and Misty says,
Psyduck, not you!
Another crazy idea. You still have Staryu's Pokeball in your hand, why not just send it out anyway? If you don't give Psyduck any orders, technically you're still only using Staryu, the Pokemon you wanted to use, so you're not breaking any rules. I'm just saying, Misty, you're very much overcomplicating things here. Shellder clamps onto Psyduck's tail, and Ash jokes that it's gonna be a Cybro. Misty says she never heard of a Cybro, and Brock jumps in immediately to tell her.
That's because there's no such thing.
Alright, mate, Ash was only kidding. Jesus, who invited the fun police? And yes, I'm well aware it's pretty rich of me to call someone out for taking the fun out of Pokemon, but hey, I wouldn't be on brand if I wasn't a hypocrite. Psyduck quickly turns and flings Shellder into the the air. Misty says it just used its tail wag attack, which isn't an attack, but okay. And then out of nowhere, Ash just decides to tell Misty, oh, I made up the Cybro thing. Okay, Ash? I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody kind of figured you were just joking. Like, no need to feel bad. It's not that deep, mate. James tells Weezing to attack Psyduck, but instead of using an actual attack like Tackle or Smog, or even Haze, which supposedly does damage if we're to believe what we saw earlier, it just bounces up and down on Psyduck's head. Now, I'm pretty sure Team Rocket have faced Misty's Psyduck before, so they know that if it takes enough blows to the head, its headache gets worse and it unlocks its psychic powers. So I really have to ask, Weezing, the fuck are you doing, you dumbass? It's almost like Weezing's just got bored of all this Slowpoke stuff and just wants to be done for the day. Shellder's size is all over the place this episode. Sometimes it's tiny, and other times, like now, it's big enough to fit over Psyduck's massive head. Make your mind up, animators. Psyduck's headache reaches its peak, and at this point, Team Rocket must be like,
this is the one thing we didn't want to happen.
Psyduck uses Disable, and as it always seems to do in the anime, it affects all of Team Rocket instead of just one opponent like it should. Misty is a hacker. Confirmed. Direct quote from Westwood, who begins taking notes about Psyduck.
I've read about these attacks, but this is the first time I've seen them.
Westwood, mate, you program the Pokedex. You're supposed to be a top Pokologist and you've never seen a Psyduck use confusion? You need to leave your lab once in a while, mate. The fresh air will do you good. So after all the effort everybody went to try and protect Slowpoke, Slowpoke thinks it's a good idea to try and step over Shellder, but trips and lands face first in the sand in a perfect position for Shellder to bite its tail. What can I really say about this, other than Slowpoke, you absolute twat? Westwood comments that Slowpoke is beginning to evolve and starts taking notes, although Slowpoke evolves in less than a second. I would love to see just how much Westwood managed to write down in that time. I bet his notes literally just say Slowpoke started to, and that's it. Nothing more. Also, just a heads up, from this point on, I'm going to try my utmost best to try and refer to Slowbro as Slowbro and not accidentally slip up and call it Slowpoke. But I guarantee I will probably accidentally call it Slowpoke at some point during the rest of this video. Like, it's an easy mistake to make. When you've been recording for over an hour and you've been saying the name Slowpoke over and over and over again, referring to this character, and now you've suddenly got to change it to Slowbro, which is so similar to Slowpoke, yeah, I'm bound to mess up. Just don't be too salty when I do. Westwood mentions that Slowbro has a very powerful attack, the Mega Punch. Alright, firstly, Slowbro can't learn Mega Punch without the use of a TM. And whenever I mention TMs in this series, you guys all whinge at me because apparently TMs aren't canon in the anime, which means that it's technically impossible for Slowbro to learn Mega Punch. But regardless, who in their right mind uses Mega Punch on a Slowbro? Or on anyone for that matter? 80 base power and 85% accuracy? Just use Headbutt if you insist on using a normal type move. At least that's 100% accurate. When told to use Mega Punch, Slowbro looks confused, probably because it's wondering how it's expected to use a move that it's impossible for it to learn in this particular world. And Westwood says that it's because it's suffering the effects of its own move, amnesia. Brock then exclaims,
That's supposed to make its opponent forget.
Brock, what the hell are you talking about, mate? Amnesia raises the user's special stat by 2 stages. You can't even use it on an opponent. And to think you once called yourself a gym leader. Slowbro suddenly remembers how to use Mega Punch. So what you're telling me is you actually just needed another half-minute of filler to pad out the episode. Seriously, this episode could have easily been 10 minutes long if we just took out all the padding. That's why it's so hard to find WTF moments for this episode, because literally nothing happens for half the runtime. Slowbro punches a woman. Man, TV in the 90s really has aged horribly. Westwood says he's finally figured out why Shellder clamps onto Slowpoke's tail to make Slowbro. It's because it's mutually beneficial. I'm sure that's probably accurate, but his reasoning here is way off. He says it benefits Slowbro because the shellder on its tail helps it balance when it stands on 2 feet, allowing it to use moves like the Mega Punch, even though it can't learn Mega Punch without a TM, which means that in the wild, no Slowbro would know this move. Westwood says it benefits Shellder because Shellder can now travel on the land. Okay, sure, but is that really a benefit to Shellder since it can only go where Slowbro goes? And can it really be called traveling if it's not in control of its destination? It's not like when it gets to a particular location, it's gonna unclamp and be like, bye Slowbro, thanks for the ride.
Well, actually, Liam, I think you'll find in the Pokédex entry for Pokemon Yellow, it says if Shellder lets go of Slowbro's tail, Slowbro will change back into Slowpoke.
Yeah, but let's face it, that's one of the Pokédex entries that's just full of shit. To be honest, that entry is probably one of Westwood's fake ones. Long story short, Westwood's theory makes no sense, and he hasn't even explained why Shellder changes from a hinge shell to a spiral shell. Westwood's a crap scientist. Pass it on. Mate, how creepy is it that the Shellder on Slowbro's tail still cries out, Shellder, Shellder, as if it isn't part of a new Pokemon? Is that how it works? Is this Shellder still a Shellder and is technically not part of the new Slowbro? Is it literally just captive for the rest of its days now? This opens up so many questions. Like, can the Shellder die of old age before the Slowbro or vice versa? Can the Shellder still use attacks if it's a separate Pokemon? I feel like I'm coming out of this episode knowing less about Slowbro than I did going in. As Ash and friends are walking away from Westwood's lab, Psyduck is looking back longingly. Ash deduces that it probably wants to say goodbye to Slowbro before they leave. Well, maybe you should have done that, I don't know, before you left? Psyduck, I know you're an idiot, mate, but don't be such a fucking idiot. And the episode ends with more confused Psyduck and Slowbro back and forth. Yeah, man, Pokemon really has their episode format down. This is the kind of action we all tune in to watch. Don't get me wrong, this is funny the first time, but at this point in the episode, it's really dragging on. But on the plus side, yay, we got through another filler episode. We're getting closer and closer to the Pokemon League.
Actually, Liam, I think you'll find next week is another filler episode.
What the fuck? So those are my WTF moments for Pokemon Season 1, Episode 66, The Evolution Solution. Let me know your favorites and any that I missed down in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to help the channel. Use code ACE for money off G Fuel and head over to twitch.tv/AceTriniLiam for all of my live streams. But until next time, I'm Ace Trinilium. Keep on training.